Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai, a space where we'll talk about anything and everything surrounding the people that grind through your month-end accounting close.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second part of our conversation about what it's like to be a controller. Today, we're talking to three controllers about their journey and what they've learned by moving up to the controller position. On this episode, we're joined once again by Angelina Hendraka, Chief Accounting Officer at PowerSchool, Amy Garefis, Chief Accounting Officer at ZipRecruiter, and Wendy Zheng, Corporate Controller at Okta. Today, we're talking about cross-functional rotations, our favorite departments, and what you can do to become a controller. Now I'll hand it over to our host, Gapify CEO, Jotham Tai.
Yeah, and in a dynamic, fast-paced environment, to your point, Wendy, it's so hard to keep tracking everything in the same place. And you're trying to move up to the next levels, but you need this succession to happen in order for your higher ups to give you the opportunities to leave your seat and do something else. And that actually reminded me, Wendy, I think a model that I really love seeing, and I think it's really worked well for Atlassian. I think you folks may know some folks there, but they have done a great job just allowing folks from their accounting team to transfer to different parts of finance, which has gotten their group motivated and excited. Obviously, I think we also have to manage a business and run a close and have consistency. So there's a part of me that says, well, we like to keep things running as usual, but at the same time, for professional development and just employee happiness perspective, seems like that's a good idea. I'd love to hear the group's thoughts on cross-functional rotations. Have you folks seen it, and have you found that to be successful as well?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and this is kind of my personal my personal view, that to the extent you can fill the jobs internally through either cross-functional transfer or promotion, you absolutely have to do that, because I think it's a great story to tell for the employees. And it also makes sure that the people that are moving into the seat is somebody that already knows, that already has some knowledge of the company, right? So, whenever there is an open position, be it, you need somebody for mat leave cover, or you need somebody for leave of absence cover, or when somebody leaves a role and there's a gap that needs to be backfilled, I always try to see if there is somebody internal that is ready and willing to be stepping into that role. Now, chances are it is going to turn into somewhat of a musical chair, because you have to backfill the person, right? But if you're smart about it, and if your budget does allow, then maybe what you can do is you can backfill at a lower level the role that was left by the person that's going into another position. And again, I think it's a great story to tell. It's a great retention tool. And I think personally, the team benefits from it too, because if this person comes back to the original role, they actually came back with a knowledge of how the other function is working. And to me, if the accounting organization is large and everyone is pretty siloed in their own specific areas, and you're not in a smaller org where you're forced to wear multiple hats, this is probably a way to kind of get opportunity to have exposure to other areas.
Makes sense. Anything to add, Wendy or Amy, to Angelina's point?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, at my company at ZipRecruiter, we haven't had a lot of movement in and out of the accounting department. But I would say up until recently, now we're about 40 people, but up until recently, every time we'd hire someone within the accounting department, we kind of shift a lot of roles for every single person. And it's like we would hire somebody, on the payroll team, but that would then have a ripple effect that we can say, oh, these journal entries that the payroll team is doing can now move to this person. Now this person's AP stuff can move to this person. So we had this kind of chaotic at times rotation of duties that were constantly being moved around to different people within the department. And so I think that gave them, to touch on a couple things you said today, it gave them good exposure to like what people were doing in the different areas. And then it also kind of, gave them that opportunity to see what the person next to them is doing and kind of walk a little bit in their shoes. And I think up until recently, like I said, scaling to like a 40-person team, we've had that effect. Now, we're kind of more stable in our growth, just because, as you two know, that year after being public, you just wake up and realize you need 50 more people than you had a month ago. So now we're a little bit more stable in our hiring. And I've also come to realize that while that rotation was fun and interesting for a lot of people, I think we're also looking for a little bit of stability too, because with the ramp of growth after being public, there's still so much to learn. Even if you are technically sitting in the same seat, like you're doing things today and tomorrow and the next week that have never been done before. So it's kind of like you're transferring within your own role even.
I agree. There's a lot of growth within roles when you take that big leap from private to public. I think additionally, in that same balancing act where we're talking about the high growth environment and hiring up the team, we don't have a formal transfer program at Okta, but we try to understand everyone's expectations, right? Some people prefer that stability, some people prefer, the growth. So with that in mind, I think every manager holds, those career conversations to understand expectations. We've also put sort of guardrails around transfers and whatnot. For example, you have to be in your current role that you're hired into for about 12 months before, moving up forward, just to, again, we hired for a need. We need to stabilize that need before moving forward. But also just planning ahead. We know we're growing. We know every department's going to continuously hire. So is there an interest to you in FP&A or in IA or in, other areas? And if so, let's make sure we keep that in mind. And let's make sure that when that opportunity comes up, we can plan for it accordingly. So it's more of a proactive versus, trying to backfill. And, both ways are happening at the same time. Don't get me wrong. But trying to be proactive, at least we know then we can create opportunities for existing team members that have that desire.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because we have gotten into situations where we thought, such and such will be perfect for this role. And then we would approach that person and then that person will be like, no, I'm actually completely happy doing what I am with my workload. And I think I do a good job in my role, so just leave me alone. So it's not in that exact word, but we've gotten into that situation and we'll step back and we'll be like, okay, so I guess not everyone has the same career aspiration and not everyone is as interested as, the next person in moving up or in, gaining exposure in other locations. So.
Yeah, Angelina, that reminds me of there's really only one person I consider a mentor in my career, and this is the former CAO at Symantec. But he was very methodical about the mix of resources and their ambitions and what the right mixes in different groups. I'm like, wow, like I had no idea, this much thought. Doing this much thought will not only allow you to plan, from a capacity standpoint, but make sure you create the opportunities that you want for your team. So there's just so much into this. And Ryan here is our host and producer. He's been on several episodes already. I bet you had no idea that we were talking non-numbers today. Did you?
It reminds me. So I was a public school teacher for 7 years, and this idea of so I was a social studies teacher, and you do all this preparation, you study all this history, and you think that knowledge of history is going to make you a great teacher. And then you get up in front of the classroom and you instantly realize, oh, this is about managing people, right? Like if you can't get 30 kids to listen to you, or if you can't get those classroom dynamics right, it doesn't matter how much you know about history. And so hearing all of you talk about this journey of knowing all this about these spreadsheets or accounting, and then kind of this transition upward and learning how to manage with people is something that I really relate to. And there's honestly there's not a great roadmap for that journey. It's kind of something you just have to learn as you go.
Yeah. And our jobs are probably a lot easier than the job of a school teacher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. So we've got a couple minutes left and then a couple questions too. One is a very fun one. I just want to go around the room. Every controller has a specific department that's near and dear to their heart. So I'm going to ask each of you to choose that one. I'll go first. Mine was always international accounting. I just love consolidation, FAS 52. I'm the type that would correct people about revaluation versus remeasurement. So that was always, my favorite. Wendy, which one would comes to mind? It's usually the ones that you're good at naturally, right?
I think naturally coming from public accounting, you sort of hold the stick at the financial reporting end, right? And you got to make sure whatever goes out is absolutely golden. And I think that's your catcher's mitt within the accounting organization to, review and catch anything. And so, there's a heavy reliance on that organization. So, additionally, to Angelina's point, they hold accounting policy. So they kind of build not a playbook per se, but they build sort of the recipe for, how to account for things, and then the team operationalize it. So to me, there's sort of a very important oversight function, but I also grew up in that technical public accounting space as well. So maybe there's some correlation there.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, how about yours?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this speaks to the fact that I didn't have a public accounting background, but I would say GL is, to use your words, near and dear to my heart. I like it because there's, in my mind, there's, I guess in technical accounting too, but there's creativity. There's figuring out how you're going to solve not just problems as they are presented on, a piece of paper on your 10Q or whatever, but like actual business problems. And it forces you to work, with the different departments throughout your team and or throughout the company. And I really felt like working in GL, you have this like innate connection that you're part of the company. And so, that I'm going to have to go with GL as my final answer.
Hey, Amy, it is fun going to marketing and describing what prepaid is versus expenses.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? We're seeing this more and more with our customers. And I guess, sorry, I'm going to squeeze in a kind of a technical accounting question. Are you folks seeing that accruing for prepaids is a thing now, like grossing up the balance sheet and doing unpaid prepaids? Is that anyone seeing that from their teams?
No.
Maybe
Okay.
operationally, but you have to gross it back down to your financial reporting.
Shrink it down. Period.
It's not being grossed down. And back in the day, you would always, gross these down, right?
Yeah.
But now they're grossing up the prepaid and the liability, which to me, so that's something we're working on our product now because we're getting that request so much. But anyway, thought I'd ask.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and I forget which guidance is or literature is pushing it that way, but there's definitely a growing trend that we've seen from our customers on that.
That's interesting.
But I love GL as well. Amy, I think that would be my second favorite.
To choose from.
You're basically it's similar to asking us what our favorite kid is.
Yeah,
I know, right? That's so unfair.
Right? And then guess what? So mine rotates over time, right? I mean, the first one is always financial reporting and technical accounting, and I think that's because I grew up there. And then I do like GL because I like accounting ops because I love tinkering, right? It's basically kind of the non-fancy word for finance transformation. So looking for ways to streamline and make things a little bit easier, hearing about pain points, learning about potential solutions and seeing the results and benefits of implementing them. So those are great. But my current favorite child is actually procurement. So it's new, and I've always managed the function from the back end side, right? It's kind of the purchase order posting and then the invoice and the accruals. But procurement is kind of the front end. And to me, that's kind of a true strategic partner of the business because you are trying to save the company money. And, my head of procurement said it so perfectly to me because she was like, Well, if you're trying to grow revenue, what you see in the bottom line is basically a fraction of that revenue, because that revenue has to come with cost and all that. But if you're saving on expenses, every dollar that you save goes to your bottom line. And it's just fun looking at these different vendor contracts, and it's fun negotiating with the vendors as well, and making sure that you get more for less. So yeah, and then that's and it's so your achievement is so easily quantifiable, right? Because it's basically the amount of the savings that you make for the company. So that's my current favorite child.
Angelina, do you know the best way to streamline procurement operations is to just give everyone a corporate card and just let them go. And then your GL team can just record the transactions at month end, but you won't have any procurement issues if everyone's just spending with their cards.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I was talking to Amy about this, but where I guess we discovered that both of us are fans of true crime, I guess. And then there is a person that had, I think she used to work for HP, and she had multiple corporate cards. She worked in marketing, and then she basically uses those corporate cards to pay for herself. So I don't know about that.
Yeah, I have scary in my consulting days have seen that, where every employee got a corporate card, and that was a disaster.
No, I know.
Well, we've got time for one last question, and I'm going to tee it up as pretend Jotham here is a rock star senior accountant. I'm crushing journal entries, I'm crushing recons. But I'm going to go to you and ask, what is the quickest way for me to be a controller? What skills do I pick up? What kind of advice do you have? So eager Jotham here wants to learn from you. What would you say to eager Jotham? So Angelina, will stick with you first.
Okay, so I guess, my first advice would be to look at to look at your skill set, and then try to find out where your gaps are and try to fill those gaps. And if you're crushing it at journal entries, chances are you're, you know your operations, you know your systems, and you're probably pretty technical. So could it be that you are currently an individual contributor and you need more experience managing people, maybe informally? And could that be the area that maybe will give you opportunities to develop and grow in? So to me, it is all about understanding where your gaps are and how to address those gaps. Because I think as a controller, you do need to be well-rounded. And I keep on going back to my original comment about being the jack of all trades and master of none. And at some point, you just need to know enough these other areas to be dangerous. So that would be my advice.
That's awesome advice. Wendy, what about you?
Yeah, similar analogy, filling your tool belt, right? It's really important. And you fill it from a pillar standpoint of scope, which could be RevRec, GL, international accounting, financial reporting, and you kind of can dab into various areas through a rotation program, but also in depth, right? And that's the people management skills. Those are understanding the business. Can you be in a role which is more tangible to supporting the business? I think it, again, depends on the person's expectations and desires and what they really crave and excel in. How can we continue to promote on that track? So it's a very continuous track versus, every step of the way is counted as a ladder, for lack of better analogy. But to me, it's just very continuous. And the more stretch opportunities you take and the hunger you have to continue learning things are what usually drives the person to excel and be ready for the next role.
Absolutely. Amy, last but not least.
Yeah, just to add, I would say to start, start managing and start owning. So going from, I think Wendy said it, from being a doer to an owner is a really, really hard step. And, you can do those 100 journal entries really well and really fast, but being creative and taking the initiative to fully own that process is what makes the difference between an individual contributor to a manager. And as a controller, you're going to be a manager. As we talked at the beginning of this, you're going to be doing less and less of the actual work and more of the the strategic vision and removing the blockers. So, whether it's managing people, if you have that opportunity, yeah, that's great. But even before you get to the people manager part, managing and owning processes is really like what I think is the difference between the rock star senior accountant and someone that's going to be a leader in the organization.
I heard the term owning several times in these responses, and I think that really is a key driver there. You're not just responsible for aligning your checklist, you're owning groups, your favorite groups, and more. But this has been, go ahead.
And then part of that ownership as well is being able to know who your business partners are, like people that are outside of your organization, but you have to partner with to achieve certain results. And to me, the hardest part of your job is influencing somebody and making them do things that you want, that they don't necessarily want, and they don't necessarily have any incentives to. So to me, there are some of our senior accountants that are really, really good at that business partnership and influencing. And that, I think, sets them apart from, the ones that are just kind of going through the checklist.
Yeah, a perfect example would be software capitalization entries and the partnership with engineering. If engineering says, hey, senior accountant, I'm not getting you that stuff by your due date, then you need to be able to influence. So that's a great point. And I know we're past time, but also reminds me, and would love for anyone to weigh in here. It's also dealing with escalations, right? Like, what if your payroll and stock admin go at it again, or, maybe someone in a different department, doesn't agree with something. There's a lot of refereeing involved here too, isn't there? Well, I see some nods, but yes, it sounds like, it's definitely something that I've had to learn too. That, it's not just about my output, my work, but then when you're managing people, it's the relationships that they have, and sometimes jumping in and guiding the team along the way, which is doesn't come naturally for a lot of us accountants. So there's a lot of different things that controllers have to pick up to become effective controllers. So this is why I was really excited to do this episode today. So thank you, Angelina, Amy, Wendy. This has been such an amazing episode. I think we've got a lot of great information to share with our community. Looks like we lost Wendy.
Uh-oh.
Well, it is time to wrap up, but thank you all for joining, and hopefully we can get you back on a future episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.